of the Labor Committee to order. Let the record reflect that we do have a quorum, and I wanted to welcome Senator Bart Williams, new member of the Labor Committee, to the committee. Great to have you on board. And you got a good face mask there. It looks like a younger mask. All right, we got 4 bills we're going to take up today, and 2 of them are bills that not only passed the committee last year, but also passed the Senate. Got a little bogged down in the House last year, so we're bringing them back. They're the exact same bills as we passed last year. The first one I'm going to take up is Senate Bill number 2019, also known as the Ban the Box Act. Essentially, what it does is when someone's had an issue with a felony and they apply for jobs, often when they check the box of have you had do you have a criminal record, have you committed a felony, that usually kills them before they get through the door. What this bill does is it allows a person applying for a job at a public entity, a state agency, local or county government. It prohibits the asking of that question, have you committed a felony, until such time as you get called in for an interview. And at the time you're called in for an interview, they can certainly do the background checks, ask the question, and they can make their determination thereafter. But this just allows folks to at least get in the door, to make a case for why they should get the job. And then once they get to the interview stage, they can then be questioned about whether they have a past criminal record. This is a bill that Senator Witherspoon has been offering for several years, and Senator, I'll recognize you now if you have any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, there we go. Thank you. You handled it well. I just would like to add that it does not include working with the school district and that elderly. We definitely want to protect our children and the elderly. So that's it.
Okay. All right, you've heard from the author of the bill. Any questions? If not, do I hear a motion?
Yes, title sufficient to pass.
I'm sorry, Senator, you're not a member of the committee, so you cannot offer that motion.
I am a member of the
Oh,
committee.
you remember?
Yes, sir.
You know, I'm brain dead. Excuse me. The motion is title sufficient to pass. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed, vote nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. Okay, I'm going to skip down to the 4th item on the list. Again, this is also a bill that passed the House, passed the committee, and also passed the Senate and got bogged down in the House. It's called it's essentially the Senate Bill number 2792, the Fresh Start Act. I see we have a typo here. It should be the, I'm sorry, no, this is correct. Fresh Start Act of 2019. In 2019, we made some changes to allow people who had committed felonies to be relicensed. In 2019, we established, I think, about 8 categories. What this bill does, it says that notwithstanding any other provisions of law, anyone can, no one can be banned from getting a license if they, on the sole reason that they have committed a felony. Now, there's still a due process of if the board, commission, or licensing entity has procedures in place to determine whether someone winds up getting licensed, those provisions remain in place. But you cannot just out of hand eliminate someone from being able to get a license just on the fact that they received a felony. There've got to be other mitigating reasons for it. That's an explanation of the bill. As I say, it passed the committee last year, also passed the Senate floor and went to the House. Question? We're on 2792. Questions? Senator Sojourner.
And I'm not, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick, that we had so many of these reform bills last year, it was hard to keep up with which one did what. In this one, regarding the licensing, does it prohibit them from receiving a license to teach or a license to work with elderly? I mean, like I know in Senator Witherspoon's Ban the Box, there's those carve-outs for
Right.
those fields. Are those in this bill?
If the authorizing entity has provisions that prohibit felons from being licensed to teach and so forth, those will remain in place. If there are prohibitions on a person working with the elderly because they've committed a felony, those provisions would remain intact.
Okay, thank you. And this bill specifically just pertains to the licensing aspect?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Not, do I hear a motion?
Title sufficient, do pass.
All right, motion is title sufficient, do pass on Senate Bill number 2792. All in favor, vote aye. All opposed, vote no. Ayes appear to have it, ayes appear to have it, ayes have it. All right, we're going to Senate Bill 2248 now. This is a bill that was requested by Senator Sparks. He's here with us to explain the bill. As I understand it, if a law enforcement official is test positive for an illicit drug, they have the option within 2 days of being notified that they've tested positive to request that they get a second test. And then within 5 days of making the request, they have to have a hair follicle sample tested, which is going to be a lot more precise than a urine test or what have you. They have 5 days. If at the end of that 5 days they test negative, then the cost for the test is borne by the employer. If they test positive, the cost is borne by the person who tested positive. But it just, as I understand, gives some additional due process to make sure that there aren't any false positives that will ruin a person's career. I'm going to recognize Senator Sparks for any comments he might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to be here today, and the explanation of the bill, I think, captures the spirit. It is simply a right to refute. If I have, for whatever reason in my employment as a law enforcement officer, am required to take a urinalysis and something shows in my system, I have 2 business days to notify in writing that department that I will be obtaining at my expense initially a more precise hair follicle test. I must have that test within 5 days. You want to give them enough time to get an appointment scheduled. And if that test is in fact negative, the first test is deemed a false positive, and I'm not to be suspended without pay pending this. You know, now if my agency says administratively we're going to set you down until we get that test, that's still their prerogative. But that is what the bill does, and this was a bill that was requested through the Police Benevolent Association, so I know they've had some possibilities where this has occurred, and I would yield to any questions if there are any.
Senator Sojourner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Sparks, so would this pertain to whether it was a local PD, SO, MHP, MBI, anyone working at any level of law enforcement?
I do believe it would, because it's a part-time or full-time officer, and of course we have the accreditation program, so I would think any officer that would be covered should be, because it's all about, again, your license or your accreditation, and we're trying to save that accreditation.
Okay, perfect. I think it should, so that's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions? Now, do I hear a motion? All right, motion is title sufficient, do pass on Senate Bill 2248. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, vote no. Yeah, ayes appear to have it, the ayes appear to have it, the ayes have it. The final bill that we've got, thank you, Senator Sparks. The final bill that we have before us is a bill authored by Senator Boyd, Senate Bill 2330. It essentially is an equal pay bill that for public agencies, any state agency, city or county entity, may not pay any of its employees at a rate less than the rate paid to employees of another sex for equal work with the same establishment. That's essentially what the bill does. It only applies to public entities. My understanding is the state of Alabama brought this bill forward a couple of years ago, had no dissenting votes within the legislature. We have the Senator Boyd here to explain the bill and to answer any questions folks might have. I'm going to recognize her at this time. Senator, I think in order to be heard, for those online, you need to speak into the microphone. You're going to need to turn the mic on.
This bill has passed the Senate chamber, from what I understand now, 2 years in a row. I was only here last year, where we put in an equal pay bill for women. And we are the only state in the country that does not have anything on the books that guarantees equal pay for women. But we've changed the bill a little bit this year. We have put it in place just for political agencies, political subdivisions of the state. So it just applies to the government, essentially, and state government and those political subdivisions. So we're trying a different approach with you, because we do this bill every year, and it goes over to the other chamber and it dies. And so we know that there is a substantial gap for women in the state and across the country, but particularly in this state. And those statistics bear out, and if you are a woman of color, it becomes more statistically significant. So this is a step for us in the right direction of looking at this issue and trying to do it, but we're first going to do it with government, and we're going to look and see what we can do in that arena and making sure that we have this option in place. The Attorney General's office is here too. They have been instrumental in kind of looking at this legislation and kind of pushing this issue, and so they are here as well to look at this and answer questions.
All right, we have Mr. Kyle Williams and Mr. Gregory Alston with the Attorney General's office. Gentlemen, do you have any comments that you'd like to make in support of this?
Very briefly, I think that Senator Boyd covered it. Certainly, this bill doesn't.
You identify yourself,
Oh,
Mr.
yes, sir.
Williams?
Kyle Williams with the Attorney General's office. Certainly, this bill doesn't have the breadth that previous versions have had, but in the spirit of trying to get some version passed and make Mississippi the 50th state in the country to adopt some form of equal pay legislation, this is a kind of an incremental approach that we're hoping can be implemented and serve kind of as a test for potentially a more broad application in the future.
And we do understand that the Attorney General is in support of the bill.
Yes, Chairman, very, very much so.
I got a call from the Attorney General this morning expressing her support of the measure. Unless are there any questions from the committee at this time? Senator Sojourner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have just a couple of questions. And this is my first time at seeing the bill, so I apologize, and I've been trying to listen more than read. The short title speaks specifically to sex. I'm assuming in this first section, some of this language pertains to the fact that, let's say that I've got, or take, for example, a male counterpart has got a master's degree and 20 years experience, and I've got an associate's degree and I'm 2 years on the job. Am I, per this bill, because we're doing equal work, we're doing the same job, we're doing equal work, but am I entitled to, just based off my sex, the same pay that he would be because he may have additional years of experience, education, certifications?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that, and I'm going to stand because I'm in the world's shortest chair.
Absolutely.
Right, and I'm height challenged. So what this bill does is you're looking at a parity situation. You would need to have equal experience, equal work, equal employment evaluations. you would need to be equal in every aspect. So it's not just looking, you look at sex, but then you also look at the general job performance, job equity, skills, I mean, everything. So you're taking all those things into account when you look at this situation. And so what you're trying to do is, based on sex alone, you know, if you were all things equal, and you looked at that, and what you usually see in those situations too is you see a pattern. When I did employment law, you would see a pattern of individuals who, you know, that they may have had the exact same qualifications, but you would possibly see a person of a different sex that was paid more just for that matter alone. So it never looks at stuff in just isolation. It's always looking at it in context with that. So these are very difficult cases to make. They're very difficult to bring forward because of those situations. So and that was something I know when I did employment law. You don't see a huge amount of these because they're very difficult cases to bring forth.
So one other quick question. I know in your explanation, you referred to, you know, the female employee receiving equal pay. Does this bill work the other way?
It would.
Yes.
So if the female player, then the
Absolutely.
male?
So Senator Sojourner, I'm going to point you to line 25 through 30 of the bill. Anyone who files a claim against his or her employer for violation of the section must plead with particularity in demonstrating the following: that the employee was paid less than someone for equal work despite possessing equal skill, effort, education, experience, and responsibility.
Okay, thank you. One last question. I know the bill speaks specifically to gender, and I guess would be viewed kind of as an anti-discrimination type effort. So if we pass this, then I'm assuming at some point we may be looking at similar bills for ethnicity, religious affiliation, political affiliation. I mean, I'm just wondering, I mean, is this just a sex-based issue? There are lots of other ways that, you know, people feel discriminated one way or the other.
Right now, we're looking strictly at gender with this bill. So,
Thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Senator Sojourner. Yes, Mr. Williams?
Mr. Chairman, in responding to that, I did want to just a couple of comments. The same language appears beginning on line 12 that describes the job, and it says jobs which require equal skill, effort, education, experience, responsibility, and performance under similar working conditions. And then it also goes on to set out,
Exceptions.
that's right, payment structures that are permissible. And so a seniority system, so if you've been there longer, you could get paid more. A merit system, which quite frankly I had to go look up, and the Department of Labor says that a merit pay is defined as a raise in pay based on a set of criteria established by the employer. So these are objective measures that employees are expected to meet. A system which in line 18, a system which requires measure earnings by quantity or quality. So if you make more widgets than your counterpart, it would be acceptable for you to be paid more based on that. And then the broadest area is on the following page, line 20, any differential based on any factor other than sex. And so there's some authorities that kind of talk about this as being a catch-all, but I believe it's universally seen as a very broad way in which an employer could justify a payment structure. And then I would also add, Chairman, because I should have done this when you allowed me to make some initial remarks, this bill is different in some respects from previous bills that have come through. It also has some similarities, but beginning on line 25 that the Chairman referred to a minute ago, there's a requirement to plead with particularity. So this isn't just a standard pleading requirements that you see in complaints, which is kind of the practice in most civil litigation. This requires an enhanced level of pleading, so you have to show with specificity in your pleadings that you meet A and B there. And in addition, it came up last year on the Senate floor, kind of this concern of double recovery, double dipping. If you can pursue a federal action and then simultaneously or at some point thereafter or before pursue a state action. And kind of the obvious concerns that would impose on Mississippi employers. And so paragraph 5 there includes language that we believe is tight enough to prevent any sort of double recovery. And then I think it's also important to note, back up in line 21, the federal law sets forth various forms of damages and recovery that a plaintiff can obtain. This bill limits that, and it mirrors Alabama's language, as I recall, that says that you can obtain the difference in pay plus interest. And so it doesn't include attorney's fees or punitive damages or other types of relief like that. If you were paid $39, if you were paid $1 less an hour than the counterpart that meets under all the circumstances set forth in Section 1, you're paid $1 less for a 40-hour week, you're owed $40 for that week plus interest. And so it limits the recovery that a plaintiff could obtain. And again, this bill tries to strike a balance between protecting employees in the workplace, and also from a practical standpoint, it's aimed toward allowing Mississippi to get some type of legislation on the books. I know, Senator Witherspoon, you've pursued this issue for many, many years. And so I know you recognize that there's some differences here. Kind of the slogan that we've used around the office is not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And so if we can get some legislation on the books and make Mississippi the 50th state to do so, we think that'd be a step in the positive direction.
Senator Sojourner.
One last question. Thank you, Mr. Williams, for that explanation. That's helpful. I see, so there's no language in here. Let's say if a plaintiff files a case against a state entity and they are unsuccessful in that case, is that plaintiff going to be responsible for the cost incurred by the state for moving forward with that case?
Senator, there's not language that would cover that. And I would say, and Senator Boyd, I know we've got several attorneys in here that could keep me in line. I think it would be, the standard in Mississippi law is if you're unsuccessful, there's generally not an automatic award of attorney's fees. It's generally specified specifically by statute, so it's not in here. But I think it's probably not in the norm to do that. But to answer your question, currently the defendant would not be reimbursed for attorney's fees.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Yes, Senator Williams.
One other question. If the plaintiff is successful, would the plaintiff be reimbursed for their attorney fees? Or they'll just be reimbursed for the difference in pay plus interest?
Senator, under the current language, just the difference in pay.
That's what I thought. Just clarifying. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any more questions? If not, is there a motion?
Title sufficient to pass.
All right, motion is title sufficient to pass on Senate Bill 2331. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, vote nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. Is there a further motion?
Rise and report.
Motion is rise and report.